Have you ever found yourself sitting in a conversation, feeling completely out of place? Ever looked around and wondered why people are trying so hard to fit in? If you've ever felt like social interactions are a pointless game you just don't want to play, then you're not alone. And this video is for you. But hey, if you've never felt this way before, maybe it's time to ask yourself a tough question. Have you been living a lie? Because today, we're diving into a brutal truth that Arthur Schopenhauer, the philosopher of pessimism, laid out with chilling clarity. Most people are living trapped in a farce. They dress how they think they should. They behave the way society expects, and they speak in ways they believe will gain them approval. But here's the big question nobody ever dares to ask. Acceptance from whom? What if I told you that the entire social structure we've been conditioned to follow might just be a game? One that keeps you distracted from something deeper, something more real? If you've ever wondered about the point of fitting in and whether you've been chasing an illusion of belonging, stick around. We're about to break it all down, starting with a painful but necessary truth. Let's get into it. Think about it for a moment. How often have you found yourself trapped in a conversation that felt utterly pointless, just to avoid appearing rude or dismissive? How many times have you pretended to laugh at a joke that didn't amuse you in the slightest, simply because you didn't want to stand out or be labeled as different? How many times have you walked away from a social encounter feeling drained, only to realize that each interaction felt like a transaction, where you were expected to give up a part of your true self, all in exchange for the illusion of belonging? And now, let me pose to you the question that truly matters. At what cost? Schopenhauer, the philosopher of pessimism, made a brutally honest observation. Intelligence and social life are in conflict. The smarter you become, the less sense you see in the farce that is social interaction. It's not because you're arrogant or dismissive of others, but because you can see things that most people can't. You begin to see the masks that people wear, the facades they put on for the world to see. You notice the lies, disguised as kindness or courtesy, and you realize just how fragile the world truly is. You start to see a world where everyone is chasing after validation, constantly seeking approval in the eyes of others, and in doing so, they're living in a way that suppresses their true selves. The most terrifying part, however, is that you come to the realization that most people prefer to ignore all of this. They choose to go along with the charade, to live within their comfort zones, and to keep themselves distracted. Society, as a whole, is designed to entertain and distract you, not to encourage deep thinking or self-awareness. When you begin to think too much, when you begin to critically assess the world around you, that's when the discomfort begins to settle in. You notice the incoherence. You start to realize that most of your relationships are nothing more than shallow, superficial connections. You recognize that most conversations are nothing more than noise, empty chatter that serves no meaningful purpose other than to pass the time. You also come to understand that the effort to fit in, to mold yourself to what others expect of you, is a form of self-sabotage. It's a subtle form of betrayal to your authentic self, all in the name of social acceptance. This is where the dilemma comes in. If you are perceptive enough to notice these truths, if you have the intelligence and awareness to see through the masks, then you are also smart enough to feel the isolation and loneliness that come with it. Because, let's face it, the more you think, the less you fit in. And people around you begin to sense this. They feel the difference. They feel that you don't join in with the collective hysteria, the blind following of social rituals. They feel that you don't engage with the same fervor, the same devotion to societal norms. And this bothers them. It bothers them deeply because your very existence becomes a subtle threat to the carefully constructed bubble they live in. You, by simply being yourself, are a living contradiction to the conformity they are so desperately clinging to. Your presence forces them to question the legitimacy of their own actions, the authenticity of their relationships, and the true meaning behind their social interactions. This, in turn, makes you a threat to their carefully curated existence. Your refusal to participate in the farce, to adhere to the unwritten rules of society, shines a light on the emptiness of their own lives. And that is something they'd rather not acknowledge. So, in their eyes, your mere existence becomes a challenge, one that they might not be ready to confront. In a world where people are conditioned to seek approval, to validate their existence through social interactions, questioning this reality becomes a powerful yet isolating act. It's not that you are inherently better than others. It's simply that you see the world in a way that most are too afraid or unwilling to understand. You've reached a level of self-awareness that allows you to see the world for what it truly is, an intricate web of superficial connections and hollow interactions. And in doing so, you become a stranger in your own world, a silent observer who cannot help but feel increasingly detached from the social fabric that surrounds you. But the deeper question remains, at what cost have you paid for this awareness? Schopenhauer put it bluntly, solitude is the fate of all great minds, and that hurts. It hurts because society has taught you that happiness lies in connecting with others, that you need friends, social circles, belonging. But what happens when most of those connections are empty? What happens when you realize the price of socializing is mediocrity? What happens is that you start to look for something more. You start to withdraw. You begin to value your time more than other people's approval. And here's where something curious happens. At first, loneliness feels like a punishment, but then it becomes a privilege. In loneliness, you discover something society tries to hide from you at all costs: peace of mind. Schopenhauer understood this better than anyone. For him, intelligence wasn't just a blessing, it was also a curse. The more you understand the world, the less it excites you. The more you see human nature, the less you want to be part of its game. And here is where many go wrong, because they will think this message is an invitation to misanthropy, that it's about hating people or rejecting all social contact. But it's not. It's about understanding the difference between interaction and obligation. It's about giving yourself permission to choose when and with whom to socialize, rather than just going along with what's expected of you. It's about accepting the truth that intelligence doesn't need external validation. But here comes the most interesting part. When you stop seeking acceptance, something changes within you. People notice. They see you're not desperate to fit in. They see you don't depend on their approval. They see your world doesn't crumble if you're not invited to the next party. And that confuses them, because most people live trapped in the need to be seen, heard, approved. And you, by not participating in that game, become an enigma that intimidates, an enigma that intrigues. The irony of it all is that the less you care about social validation, the more power you have over it. True freedom begins when you no longer worry about what others think of you. So, the next time someone tells you that you should socialize more, that you should try harder to be more sociable, that you should be like everyone else, remember this. It's not you who's wrong. You're simply someone who's seen the truth. And the truth for most people is too uncomfortable to accept. And here's where it gets even more interesting. Because when you realize you don't need social validation, when you truly internalize that most interactions are theater, you start to notice something else: the silence. Silence becomes your ally, and that terrifies others. Because we live in a world where noise is constant. Social media, trivial conversations, news designed to provoke reactions. Everything is made to keep you in a state of perpetual distraction. Because silence forces you to think, and thinking is dangerous. Schopenhauer not only understood this, he lived it. He spent most of his life away from society, immersed in philosophy, music, and contemplation. It wasn't because he hated people. It was because he understood that the noise of the world only serves to cloud the mind. And here is where most people go wrong. They confuse solitude with isolation. But there's a huge difference between being alone and being isolated. Being alone is an act of power. It's consciously deciding that you prefer depth over superficiality, that you choose quality over quantity. Being isolated, on the other hand, is a curse. It's what someone feels when they want to fit in but can't, who strives to be accepted but never achieves it. And here's the irony. The one who desperately seeks acceptance will always be rejected, but the one who rejects it by choice will never truly be alone. Because when you walk your own path, not caring about others' approval, you attract those who truly matter, people who think, who question, who don't need to fill every second of their lives with unnecessary noise. And here's the truth. Intelligence is not antisocial. What happens is that intelligence rejects the banal. Think about this. The great geniuses of history weren't antisocial, but they weren't willing to waste their time on empty conversations either. Da Vinci spent years immersed in his work without feeling the need to share every thought with the world. Tesla worked on his inventions with an obsession that few understood. And all of them were seen as eccentric, as strange, as difficult people to deal with. Why? Because they didn't conform to the norm. They didn't follow the script of ordinary social life. Because here's the secret. Social life is just a series of predictable routines designed to keep you within the system. From the moment you're born, you're taught that being accepted is the most important thing, that you need friends, that you need to be part of a group, that isolation is bad. But no one tells you that most of those groups only exist because of the fear of loneliness, not because of real affinity. No one tells you that many people with large social circles actually feel empty. No one tells you that the best ideas, the great revolutions, the most important discoveries were born in minds that dared to step away from the noise. But there's more. Here's where many get confused. They think the solution is to completely reject society, that the answer is to become a hermit, disconnect from the world, and live in the total isolation. But it's not. Because true power isn't in running away from the world. It's in knowing when to interact with it and when not to. True power is moving in the shadows when the noise is too loud, but appearing with strength when needed. Think of the great strategists. They weren't always in the center of the battle, but when they appeared, their impact was impossible to ignore. Those who truly understand life are neither slaves to society nor fugitives from it. They're silent players. They move their pieces without announcing it. They build in the dark, and when the world finally realizes their existence, it's too late. They've already won without needing to call attention to themselves. Schopenhauer said that superior intelligence is destined for solitude, but not as a punishment, rather as an advantage. Because in solitude, you can truly build something worthwhile. But what about those who don't understand this? What happens to those who think happiness only comes from the approval of others? What happens is that they live trapped in a cycle of dependence. Every photo they upload, every story they share, every opinion they express, it's all calculated to receive a reaction, a like, a comment, a validation that makes them feel like they exist. But here's the brutal truth. If your existence depends on the reaction of others, then you've never really lived. You're just a reflection of what others expect of you, and that's the opposite of being free. Because true freedom isn't about doing whatever you want without consequences. It's about not needing anyone's approval to do what you truly desire. It's about not depending on noise to feel alive. It's being able to be alone in complete silence without feeling anxiety or the need to fill every void with distractions. And if you can't do that, then you're not free. You're a prisoner of noise. Schopenhauer understood this better than anyone, which is why he distanced himself from the world, not as an act of rejection, but as a strategy. Because only from a distance can you see reality with clarity. Only in silence can you hear your own voice. And if you've made it this far, it's because deep down, you already knew. You knew that something in modern social life doesn't make sense. You knew that many of the interactions you have are pure formality. You knew that true growth doesn't happen in the noise, but in introspection. Now, the question is, will you have the courage to accept it? Because once you do, there's no turning back. It becomes unbearable. Trivial conversations seem absurd. The need to fit in disappears, and all that's left is the truth. The truth that solitude isn't a punishment. It's a privilege reserved only for those strong enough to endure it. You can no longer deceive yourself. You can't force yourself to enjoy what once seemed normal. You can't pretend that empty conversations fulfill you, or that external validation means anything. And that's the point of no return. It's terrifying, isn't it? Because most people spend their lives trying to fit in, making silent sacrifices to be accepted, shutting down parts of their essence to avoid bothering others. But you can't do that anymore. Because now you understand something that most will never understand. Life isn't about fitting in. It's about finding what truly resonates with you and having the courage to follow that path, even if it means walking alone. And here's the most brutal paradox of all. The more you dare to be yourself, the more magnetism you generate. Because people are desperate for authenticity, but very few have the courage to be authentic. And those who do, those who move without fear, those who don't need anyone's approval, those are the ones who end up being followed. But not because they seek it, but because true freedom is so rare, so unique, that it's impossible to ignore. And now I ask you, what will you do with this information? You can't ignore it. You can pretend you never saw this video, go back to your normal life, keep participating in the farce, keep adapting to the mold that was imposed on you. Or you can do something much harder. You can accept the discomfort of the truth. You can embrace the idea that you'll never be understood by the majority. You can stop betraying yourself just to fit in. You can start living for you, not for others. Because in the end, there are two types of people in this world: those who adapt and those who find themselves. The majority chooses the first option because it's easier, more comfortable, safer. But the few who choose the second are the ones who truly leave a mark. So, tell me, what kind of person are you? If you've made it this far, I want you to leave a comment with the phrase, "Silence is power," because those who understand this are the ones ready to play the game of life by their own rules. And if this video made you think, if at any point you felt I was describing something you've always felt but never expressed, then subscribe, because this is just the beginning. See you in the next video.